Good morning, Misfits. You are tuning into another episode of the Misfit Podcast. Full Goon Squad recording
in their houses.
Not in the house.
I'm in my house. I live here now.
I'm in the COVID cave, Rona room. Hunter's in the den of dysentery, and Sherb is in the Misfit Menagerie. Hey guys, Hunter, welcome back.
Hey, thanks. Welcome to
Where'd you go?
COVID Part 2. I was in El Salvador.
Thank you so much.
For 8 days. You're welcome.
That's Spanish for the Salvador.
The Salvador.
Thank you, Sherb. Good background.
Really good.
I like that.
Yeah, I was in El Salvador for 8 days. It was good. Let's see. Got there. Only really one minor delay that got me there a little bit later on a Sunday. And then basically El Salvador has one of the best point breaks, right-hand point breaks in the world. And it was like within, it's a wave. It has a wave. It has really good waves, and one specifically that on a good day you could get a half a mile ride out of. It wasn't like pumping like that while I was there, but there were a couple points where I had it completely to myself, which was pretty unique. So surfed around there for a few days, did a day of like kind of went to a nearby volcano, that sort of thing. And but really the majority of the time
that thing pumping?
Was surfing. That thing was not pumping. No.
Someone give me a surfing dictionary. I don't understand what the hell we're talking about.
Sure, we're gonna bring you to the pumping volcano.
Go to Google pumping volcano, sure.
I feel like it's a URL I can't go to.
Oh my goodness.
Pumpingvolcano.net. Go there.
I think we had to start the podcast this way. We didn't end up having time with Luca in town to get him on the podcast. So you guys get welcome back with some not safe for work flair from the Goon Squad.
Yeah. It's been almost 14 days since our last derogatory comment. Yeah.
What about food?
Make up for lost time. I don't want to offend anyone, but it's not great. It's pretty kind of standard Central American fare. They're not known for they make something called pupusas, which are effectively like kind of like grilled quesadillas, like cheese, and you could do chorizo or like chicken or
now we're talking
rice. But yeah, they're not bad. I think it probably depends on where you go, but it wasn't necessarily a food hotspot per se. But I was also like I was relatively confined to a small section of the country. So in the country's defense, I didn't explore like the entire place, but
fair.
Yeah.
Now, El Salvador, is that like were you confined to a certain area because of like safety, or more just because you wanted to stay there and surf?
No, it was you said safety, right?
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah, no. I mean, like I wasn't like running around past dark, per
Fair.
se, but the area that I was in is much more of like I was in La Libertad, which is like a port, and it's like predominantly like fishing, like just it's almost like it's like where people come to work, and then I think like they live a little bit further inland. And I was more just confined because I didn't have a car. My transportation was basically my guide who would drive me to wherever we were going to surf for the day, to wherever we were going, and they would generally stay with you. And for the most part, you're just like I was back in the hotel at night, just eating, kind of hanging out with other folks that I met from different places, and whatnot. So it wasn't, I did ask about it, and they do have, apparently their government right now, their newest president is like cracking down heavily on gang related issues. And that's like MS-13 is the predominant gang in the area, or in the country. And one of the guides that I was driving with, he said that they were I don't know how accurate this is, but he said they were jailing between 1,000 and 2,000 people per day. Just like, and there's like national, their police, they're like, basically they have like businesses will hire like private security, but the police in El Salvador is like a national police. So it's not like your Portland, Maine police, your Westbrook police, your New York City police. It's like one national police kind of unit, and like there was a lot of them. There were like, I saw a bus, like they had a bus, they'd like stopped the bus, they were like searching all the people on the bus for whatever, drugs, guns, like gang members, whatever. So their government is apparently pretty heavily cracking down on it, or trying to. But I didn't have any issues. Only some,
I mean, you grew up on the mean cul-de-sacs of Scarborough, Maine, so you were ready.
Yeah,
Basically,
I was pretty well prepared for the heavy violence of MS-13. So I felt like I was.
It's all ads.
I could have held my own in my flip flops and a couple of surfboard fins, but otherwise,
yeah, sounds all right.
Bro, did you snap
right.
that
And
there?
you got to train a little bit with that kid beating you up in Hawaii. So
that is true. And there were a lot of kids out there who fucking ripped. So, but they were all pretty friendly. So +1 for El Salvador, still -1 for Hawaiian 12-year-old locals. God damn it.
That's great.
Only 364 more days till next year's surfing tryouts. Toughen up.
So today's episode is what I consider a pretty fun one from our point of view. There are enough topics that are getting kicked around, either the Discord, coaches groups, our Slack, conversations with our remote athletes, that I think just sort of a freestyle type episode where we cover some of this stuff and take things that we would normally spend 1, 2, 3 minutes on in a video and really maybe dig in a little bit deeper. With that being said, if you are a listener of this show and you haven't joined the Discord yet, there's some really good conversations going on in the Discord. And one of the really cool things about it is if there are questions that are being asked, we will let the community answer the question and just make sure that that's either in line with, or maybe even better, a perspective that we hadn't thought of, because we are almost always approaching it from a coaching mindset. So you're getting responses from people who are in the trenches with you, which I think, again, provides a unique perspective that lets these conversations, especially that we have on the podcast, come full circle. You get the advice from us, you get other people who are going through it that have maybe taken our advice and sort of made it work for themselves and talk through that. So you can head to discord.gg/Misfit Athletics to join. It does make sense for you to be following the program, but it's not absolutely mandatory. You can join the community and sort of start to connect the dots on the podcast to the Discord, and then maybe you make your way to the program itself. But just like this podcast, there are significantly more listeners of this show than people following specific programs. So there's still just so much value within that. And maybe just understanding that if you immerse yourself into the community, that there is a lot of value attached with that. And we can, bridge the gap on trying to be a company who provides really good programming, an ethos, a community, a brand, all that stuff kind of together. That's definitely a big goal for us. So make sure you jump into that Discord. That's where a lot of this stuff comes from.
Like when people are answering and going into Discord and asking questions, like I would say at probably half the time other misfits are answering those questions. And if you've ever been to a camp, you know that that's also sometimes the case. If it's like the Q&A day at a camp, a lot of times a like long time misfit or someone will just like be like, yep, I'm gonna answer that, and the whole, like all of us are just like, yeah, okay, well, listen to that guy. Which isn't like, that's just to say that the community, especially those who have been immersed in the community for so long, have like really taken the stuff that we try to, kind of put out in the world to heart and know the answer to it. And not only like they're not just regurgitating something that one of us might say, but they actually like have a firm, like a good understanding of it. And those are usually the people who are the most successful relative to like their, you know, their specific goals. Not saying that's the person who's going to go to the CrossFit Games, but those are the people who understand and take the programming messaging to heart are the ones who typically get the most out of it and are the like stronger community members.
For sure. So one of the first topics that I want to cover that I'm going to take from a very general perspective is the role that swimming plays on our website, how our games level athletes are handling this, how other people use it. The thing with swimming is the time commitment that it takes for someone to, obviously going to the gym, you know the hours, you know when open gym is, you know when you can take class or when your training partner is going to be there. Your garage gym, you know when you can go out there and do your math and all that. When it comes to swimming specifically, there are typically more hurdles depending on where you live and what you have access to. So the idea of us building in a piece of the pie year round where you're probably not going to get to do that movement within your specific CrossFit career for most people, with it being potentially one event a year for the highest level athletes. You're only going to see it in programming from us very specifically within Comp Block 3 or any sort of competition prep where an athlete's going to be going to a place like Wadapalooza where there is typically swimming. Now, that being said, if you have a swimming background, if you have the ability to go long and slow freestyle swimming, we have athletes that do that on their active rest day who swear by their whoop scores the following day compared to, say, only doing a math session or not doing anything at all or only doing stretching, that sort of thing. I think the issue here is that to learn how to swim, I think takes a lot of physical and mental energy. And then there's sort of this, massive skill gap between the person who's going to go try to learn how to swim and the person who can go use it for recovery. And a few people on Discord have asked about maffetone swimming. I'm sure at higher levels that people can go swim laps at that rate. I'm just not sure at what point in terms of your skill journey are you going to be able to go do that. And I don't think we are going to program it specifically. In fact, I know we're not going to program it specifically because I don't want to put that sort of constraint on an athlete who can't stay anywhere near that heart rate. If I got to go send 4 different athletes that are going to the CrossFit Games to swim, you're going to get probably 4 drastically different heart rate data, outputs from that. So I don't want to put that constraint on there. Do I think every single CrossFitter, especially if they want to be competitive, should learn how to swim freestyle long and slow? Yes, absolutely. But when you do that is a bit more on you. And sort of understanding that we have a lot of boxes to check off, and it would be great if you guys, if there weren't 24-hour days, if all of our days were 48 hours and there were 19 of them in a week, and we could just have unlimited energy and resources and all that. It's not the bottom of the totem pole or underneath the totem pole, but it's certainly not that high up.
Yeah, I feel this question on Discord, and what I tried to tell the person who was asking about maffetone, I said, swimming is an absolute awesome activity. It's unweighted, allows your body's joints to not take the impact of, running on the road, and allows you to kind of figure out where your body is in space. And it teaches a lot about like proprioception, or like where your body is. But the problem is, again, the skill element. Imagine if you were going to go ski and every single time you pulled 3 strokes, you instantly went to a heart rate of 190. Like, that's not going to allow you to be in that maffetone zone. So the prescription I would give someone brand new to this stuff is, at first, you need to be able to swim 50 meters. So down and back without stopping. Then 100 down and back without stopping, and kind of have an incremental linear progression from 50 meters to 100 to 200. And if you don't like distance, you can even do time, 1 minute to 3 minutes to 5 minutes. To
yeah,
10
I typically
minutes.
do time with my athletes.
But I would recommend that be more of your objective early on, until you find you're able to swim somewhat steadily for 20 minutes. You probably are not ready to go into the pool and try to do a maffetone session. And even 20 minutes is only half of the time that we allot for maffetone this time of year. So again, a great thing to practice. Maybe something mix in there, but unless you have a swimming background, it's not something I would typically recommend for really any athlete.
I would just The only thing I would add to that is Drew, like, he was like, if you're going, you like learn how to swim long and slow, I would have just like cut that sentence off at learn how to swim. I would say that
Sure.
there's probably plenty of people who can who cannot drown, maybe is the or who are fit enough to get from point A to point B. But swimming is heavily skill based, especially. And I would say it's even more important for CrossFitters to be as efficient as possible because like the body type of most swimmers, like with all due respect to swimmers, is not like this fucking muscle bound, you know, jacked hamster. Like, you know, you don't see the Austins or Carolines as Division I swimmers, right? So learning how to be as efficient.
Sure,
as
Doug Martin's a swimmer, right?
Yeah, him and Frank Gord, I swim laps together often. Boris Jones, Drew.
So just learning, whether that's, you know, taking a couple lessons at a community pool or finding, you know, having a friend who legitimately swam and can actually communicate how to do, you know, how to do it correctly. I would say that's going to be far more beneficial and a better use of your time than trying to I don't even know how without having somebody else there. Like, I don't know how you're going to freestyle, stare at your watch, like stop, start. To me, that's just like, it's like learn how to swim and then mix it in for an event, you know, prior to a competition and stuff like that. But like you said, Drew, that's one of about 1,000 boxes, and unless you're competing at a high level, that's a box you might not even ever check.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add is I think we see a lot of athletes out there, they go train with someone who had a swimming background, and it's, you know, I'm gonna make this part up, so I don't know what I mean. I know what it means, but I don't have the data behind it. The hundreds on every 15 or the 200s on the 45, like that's how they write swimming type programming. If you cannot get in the water and comfortably freestyle slow as a CrossFitter, that style of training makes absolutely positively no sense. Anybody can get in the water and thrash for a certain period of time. And then obviously, as the seasoned athlete is out there working on their capacity and you're trying to learn how to swim, you're not going to be able to keep up with those paces anymore. It's just not, that's the thing where we have to make sure that people understand that that's, you know, the running before walking type scenario. You got to get in the water and learn how to swim. And we've tried both styles with many athletes at the highest levels, and we can move the needle faster with swim for 5 minutes, slow, think about your stroke, think about your breathing, then 10, then 15, then 20, then 25, then 30, and following that sort of linear progression. And then eventually, like, oh, I do understand this. This is starting to click, and maybe adding in some of that interval stuff. But at that point, you are talking about the absolute tip of the spear. There's, you know, 10 men and 10 women that go to the CrossFit games that go out there and have any business trying to figure out what their split times are for shorter stuff. So just a topic to bring up. I think an area that people should explore. I love skill acquisition as its own skill. So getting yourself in the water, go find somebody, trade with them, teach them how to clean and jerk, teach them how to muscle up. They'll teach you how to swim, that sort of thing. And, you know, if this is the type of thing where you want to go back in the Discord and say, hey, it would be awesome if you put that type of linear progression with a little chart to fill in my distances on as a weakness template, we'd be happy to do that, so that you understand that it is something that we suggest.
I think we do have a swimming weakness template, don't we?
Yeah, we do. But, you know, putting that, you know, walking version of swimming onto there would be something that we can do. One other thing, another great thing coming from Discord is the sort of crossover naming conventions that we use from our website to SugarWOD. There are a lot of people right now that are sort of like, okay, so you're saying 1, 2, 3, and 4. Does morning movement count as 1, or is 1 the warm up, or is 1 the math? We are going to go in as soon as possible and update SugarWOD so that those numbers that you see on the site are there and that it makes sense. So this is basically just a square peg, round hole situation where the naming convention that works in phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 becomes confused on SugarWOD afterwards. So just sort of a nod to people who put those suggestions out, and then so you guys know that we are listening and trying to make things as easy as possible. I want your effort to be in the gym and not trying to figure out, because you don't speak Spanish, that you can't read our workouts. More math questions. Not a surprise. Not a surprise. It's definitely a frequently asked questions type thing. You guys feel free to interject at any point and steal one, but I was just going to sort of go rapid fire on this. People want to know whether they should do Maffetone fasted, because a lot of times before it popped up as fasted cardio. The thinking on this is metabolic flexibility. So you should be able to, as an athlete, perform well in a Maffetone session, fasted and not fasted. So I have overcorrected here personally, and I always do fasted. And when I'm not fasted, I can't keep my heart rate down. That is a problem. That's the type of thing where I know that my body is not used to, the end stages of digestion or whatever it is, with sort of biological, physiological change that is happening within myself. It doesn't like going and doing longer, slower stuff. Conversely, my heart rate goes up if I eat, like, considerably.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, like Sherb was there the other day, and I showed him fasted versus not fasted, and it was like 140 watts versus like 170, and this was within a couple of days of each other. And it's just one of those things where the day sort of got away from me, and I wanted to eat and hadn't done my session yet, and there was a decent gap between it. So to me, that tells me, I wanted metabolic flexibility, and all I did was flip it from my body relies on carbs to fat. We want it to rely on both. So long story long, try both. Make sure that you're comfortable with both scenarios, because what that means is when you are underfed and you are struggling at a competition, that your body knows how to go into different directions. Now, totally separate issue on its own of how not to be underfed, but I think we can probably get a more qualified guest on at some point to address that situation. So the answer is yes, do it fasted and do it not fasted, and try to come up with a scenario eventually where it's an even enough mix that you get similar results in the same space.
But don't skip it. Don't skip it because you're not able to do one or the other. That's exactly one that we always got, was like, hey, I can't do it fasted. Should I do it at all? It's like, yes, definitely. And for a little bit of context for other people, sure, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Is that my Maffetone sessions, specifically on the C2 bike, because that's where I've been for the most part, is I'm the opposite of Drew, and that my paces are typically better. My wattage is usually higher. I actually meant to send a screenshot of that. One of our coaches has been like getting into it a little bit more recently, and he was asking for everybody's stats, like as far as wattage and body weight goes.
6'1", 210.
Yeah.
Since you're wondering.
Ding ding.
Tell us. 5'8", 140,
145.
Suck me, buddy.
Oh, hey.
Such
guess who weighed 202 after his birthday?
Beefcake.
Damn,
all
202.
Cupcakes.
Where'd all that go? Yeah, cupcake.
Hey, it's still here. Maybe, I don't know. I probably weighed 194 the next day, but I did weigh 202 at night on May 2nd. That's some big boy shit right there.
My wattage is higher after I eat. It's lower when I'm fasted.
Period.
These next two actually apply to Hunter, and I think we can give him a little session here so that we can help him as an athlete. So we have two situations in one, and then a third thing that will sort of correlate. So people have asked about two different scenarios where they're stalling a little bit or regressing. When we are peaking and you are regressing a little bit, obviously that is a physiological response to overreaching and where we are trying to go. Now, there is overreaching too far, and we actually intentionally overreach a little bit too far with our highest level athletes, like 2 weeks a year, just to get them in, just to know what that feels like, to know mentally where they're at, what it's like to, let's say 1 year at the CrossFit Games, they decide that they're going to go, they're going to do a hero workout every 2 hours on a day or something like that. And obviously in other years, with flying them all over the place and having them run the hills and do, max deadlifts, that they really have absolutely taken a shit on their CNS early in the competition and had to figure out what that means for the athlete. So I would just say for the people asking specifically about while we're peaking, keep a really close eye on the other things in your life and see if you can potentially move the needle outside of the gym on this stuff with the, sauna and ice bath and getting a massage and taking the time to stretch and do all of this. And we'll get into what I experienced with watching Luca's lifestyle here in a little bit, but there are ways to move the needle. I think that some people probably aren't doing, and it just becomes a question of whether you can fit that sort of balance into your life or not. And if the answer is no, then maybe the volume does need to be dialed back a little bit.
I think a good way to think about it too is if like someone was losing weight, you had a client that came to you and was like, I'd like to lose some weight. And they're like, oh, I'm up a pound, I'm down a pound, I'm up 2 pounds, I'm down 3, I'm up 1, I'm down 4. What we're looking for is the trend line to go in the direction across a long span of time towards better. If you have a week where you go north or south by a little bit, it doesn't mean the time was wasted and you shouldn't have done the session. It just means that, like Drew was saying, maybe the other things that are in your life that allow you to train at a higher volume aren't being attended to in a manner that allows you to keep doing that. And a great example of it is like the rest and recovery, the cool downs, the fueling, all the treatments you just talked about. If you aren't doing those things when your volume is higher, you are effectively asking yourself to burn out here. So the difficult thing here is it's not 1-to-1. It's not like I worked out for 10 extra minutes today, or I did one extra session that was 15 more minutes, and I got to recover for 15 more minutes. You might be an athlete that needs 3x the amount of recovery for that one single piece, or you might be the athlete that just needs to, potentially eat 300 more calories, and that's going to push you the ability to keep going here. But don't get too wrapped up in the day-to-day. Get more concerned with the bigger picture across a phase or across multiple phases.
True. On the other side of we've got some people that are essentially like, hey, I keep the exact same wattage every single week and it's not changing very much. But I see the benefits inside of CrossFit workouts like tenfold. I personally have that on running. I'm not making massive leaps, but I don't feel like the same human being in a CrossFit workout. So that's one area where unfortunately, I can't manipulate it too much because it would be really hard to run slower. Like damn near impossible for me to run slower than I am currently when it comes to this stuff. So the good thing about these other machines, if you are stalling, is we have a lot of variables that you can manipulate. So one of the reasons why I believe Hunter's wattage has stayed fairly similar is because he has bought into the idea of being really good at the high RPM, low damper situation. I would recommend testing, and you can either agree to this or not, finding out where 80 RPMs, 81, 82, somewhere in that range gets you your heart rate. What damper is that?
What
and
damper?
Then so you would basically
I thought you were asking me. No, I got it.
You would go find out what that was, and we're manipulating his session so much by taking 20 RPMs off the table that I think he will start to see, with a little bit of a higher level of resistance, he'll start to see the needle move on that. Now, it's a good experiment because does that make him as good in the CrossFit gym? Does it just make him better on the bike? Like that's information that you can find out. But if you are in that same space where you have the damper super low and you have really high RPMs that you're needing to get to that heart rate, I suggest trying this. The other thing that you can do that I have responded in DMs to quite a few people is up that damper and get closer to that RPM level, but lower your wattage a little bit. So I think a lot of people are like we want to be below threshold. And I think a lot of people are flirting with threshold to the point where they're getting obsessed with, I cannot stay at this heart rate. And it's like, that's the highest your heart rate is supposed to be. And if we're trying to move your threshold, if we're trying to move the needle forward, let's take a step back. Let's say, for instance, you are at 160 watts every week. Doesn't matter. Tired, not tired, sore, not sore. Why don't we get you down closer to that 80 RPM range and ask you to do sessions at 140 watts? and then 145 watts, and then 150 watts. I want to know that if we do a linear progression and you back off from that threshold and we get to 165, that place that you couldn't get your body to go to before, is it able to do that now? And I think there's something to sort of training the aerobic system in that way, a little bit further away from that threshold to then move in the right direction.
So you're saying someone like me should do 80 RPMs and at whatever damper is needed to get my heart rate into that zone, into that
Yes,
area?
your X variable in this algebra equation is the damper. So you know your heart rate, you know your RPM level.
Yeah.
Still set that RPM floor at 80. I believe that's like where we're going to get that. That's going to be, to me, the floor. Like I do want certain types of athletes closer to 85, 90 RPMs, but with someone who already has a pretty good aerobic base, I think it's okay to sort of dial that back, because the end output will definitely be higher. And it's okay if your heart rate doesn't get to your MAF range.
What do you
if
say?
You're going faster.
What do you say then if you because so that will elicit a leg pump? Like even now, like for the most part, like the C2 bike specifically is not breathing. It's not a breathing thing for me.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people are in the same boat, and we try to steer people towards like, it's like, hey, I can't get my heart rate up and my legs are pumped out. And it's like, well, that usually indicates like you didn't warm up well enough. Like you didn't create like the circulation that you needed to be like continuously feeding blood and oxygen to muscle tissue. So what do you say then if it's like, well, that's fine. Like I'll do that. It's going to be a leg pump for 45 minutes.
I think you set other parameters for yourself. So you know that you're not supposed to feel burnt out in these sessions. So those first few weeks is going to be a bit more based on feel. I had to do the same thing for both Luca and Austin in terms of, okay, it looks to me like we can get a really good math session in terms of how it's supposed to feel at about 200 watts. And then now we're going to say, okay, you're going to keep that damper and you're going to keep that RPM. And next week we're going 205, then we're going 210, and we're going to gradually work our way into this. You keep your heart rate up somewhere near you so you know you're not eclipsing like where you were. Like you don't want to look up 36 minutes in and you're at, like a 170. That wouldn't be good, because the body's pretty good at building that gradual heart rate. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm comfortable. How am I at a 175 or whatever? It's just because you sort of led yourself into that place. So switching over to the more linear progression style, I think answers a lot of questions for people. And your legs aren't supposed to burn really bad. There's going to be that rare day where your legs are sore and your CNS is great and it's going to hurt. And I like that that's a thing. I like the mental toughness that's required to stay on the bike for 45 to 60 to 90 minutes when it does hurt a little bit more. But that shouldn't be every day. Like that's what happens when you do too many lunges in affiliate class. And
more than 4?
Yeah, 400. And then get on the bike. So
all right. Before we go any further, Drew, I think the next question that we might see in Discord, because of you saying that the 180 minus your age is your ceiling, what would you then say is the floor? Like if this is going to be a little bit of a range, you can be a little bit below it. Like what do you think that tolerable amount of range is for an athlete? So, because if I were doing this and I heard what you just said, I would say, all right, if I can't go above this, like whatever, I think it's 146 for me. What's the floor?
This is a teaser for talking about the heads up display later. This is a feeling. If you feel like you're doing nothing, if you feel like you're not training, like you're flushing, you're doing a recovery piece, that is not a Maffetone session. That is your floor. We need effort in this piece, right? You can, what do they say? You can speak in paragraphs, but you not like when someone comes and annoys you, your heart rate goes up and you're like, come on, get the fuck away from me. I'm trying to do this. So,
after 8 seconds, got it.
The floor is why am I doing this? Am I even trying? I don't think it should be a heart rate because I think people are just so different physiologically.
Fair.
And yeah, the C2 bike, listen, if your legs are, it's no different with how your body feels. If your legs are just absolutely annihilated, to me, that is no different than I don't care about the heart rate you told me to be at. I want to be at a 160 instead. Like if your legs are just absolutely getting trashed, it's not what we're trying to accomplish in this piece. Back it off. Like you're going to be below threshold. That's what we want. Keep going. It'd be good. Next one is fun. Next one's really fun. I don't know, Ted or Sherb, if one of you guys could pull up the actual rankings, but our age group athletes just absolutely dominated in the quarterfinals. Get the naming conventions right.
You better get it right.
Better get it right. I know it's in that Instagram post, sure, but it's the type of thing where the finishes are so high that I want to say them out loud, or let you say them out loud. Sure.
All right, I got the teenage girls, the two that I work with. Oh, all right, I'm not official. Ted wants the Instagram post. Stand by. How do you use the phone again? Thanks. All right, here we go. All right, we'll start with teenage girls. Second place, Sophie Shaft.
Second place
in
the world.
Second place in the world for 16 to 17-year-old girls with
That's
40
not bad.
points. That is not very many points for that many events. Few places down, not very many, but in fifth place, Jenna Michelotti. Another
Holy fuck.
top 10. So that's
I'm
pretty good,
talking
I'd
about.
say. And then moving on to the Masters men 45 to 49. We got Mike Kern at second in the world. Also pretty cool. In third in the world, Justin LaSala in that same age group. And then in the Young Gun Masters, we got Roy Gamboa finishing sixth, which is a nice spot to be leading up to the semifinal, which is in a few weeks here. Oh, that's right, Katie. We didn't get that, but stand by. But we also had one of Gabe's clients qualify in the Masters division.
Gabe
A long
qualified.
time. Yeah, Gabe did not qualify.
Gabe did
Gabe's
not
washed
qualify.
up like all of us.
Sherb would be really upset if Gabe qualified. Don't get him
I
upset
would
on the show.
fight him.
Fuck,
Yeah, so
I don't know how much money I would pay, but I would pay a lot of money to see Gabe v. Sherb fight.
oh
I don't know
my
if I
God.
want that. He's
Yeah,
crazy.
sure
He's a
don't
younger
want
brother.
I'll give you a cut, Sherb. I'll pay you too.
How much?
I don't
How
know.
much?
I thought you meant you were going to cut him.
He probably would do that too.
No, yeah, he definitely would. Gabe definitely comes with a razor blade in his teeth.
Oh, he does nasty
Slice
things. I
sure.
wouldn't like it.
Okay.
Wouldn't like it.
Anyway,
Back to the matter at hand. It's
That wasn't
no, no.
Sorry.
You fighting Gabe with weapons is not the goal of this conversation.
it is now.
It is now. There's also a huge shout out, just being on Discord and sort of knowing the athletes in that Masters channel, which by the way is one of the most active channels. Really, really great little community being built within that. A lot of athletes making these massive jumps, sort of posting, whatever. I came in 90th last year and I came in 60th this year, and people making these really incredible improvements. We are in the business of putting you in a position to succeed, but this is a shout out for the athletes themselves, for the work that they put in, for them executing, for them really sort of living up to the standard that they've set for themselves. And that is everybody on that leaderboard. No matter where you finished, the level of improvement and the buy-in and that community being built is pretty incredible to watch. So I know we don't have the full list out right now. It's super challenging for us once they get away from that open leaderboard to really keep track of everybody. But we do see you and we saw your improvements, whether it be on Instagram or Discord. And it's really just incredible to see, Ted posting that graphic on Misfit Athletics with how incredibly high those athletes finished, and knowing that there's an entire community behind them that's communicating with them and again making these big leaps to improve themselves on that leaderboard. So just a huge shout out to the Misfit age group squad. You guys absolutely crushed it, and we're proud to have you as part of our community.
Oh yeah.
Also, can I just add one thing? This is certainly not to take away from the athletes at all.
Good.
Yeah,
But
of course.
is that, and we've talked about this before too. It's like those athletes, and I know like the four that we named specifically are all following the teen and masters programs respectively. Those are not athletes who are like this. That's one of the more common questions, or like, and really one of the battles that we've kind of fought over the last few years and has started to become better. It's athletes wanting to do the MFT program because that's the main thing. That's like maybe the primary offering, I guess, that we have, when it's like that program is geared towards a very specific level of athlete. And those athletes, those teenagers and masters, they follow their program respectively because people like Sherb and Gabe write those programs specifically for those, those groups of people, of like those, age and like developmental, the level, basically like teenagers and masters have different requirements as far as training goes. And Sherb and Gabe make sure that those get met. And those athletes buy into it. Those athletes aren't bouncing between programs, or don't have the FOMO of like, oh, I'm not doing the same program that Paige or Caroline or whatever are doing. But it's like, no, this is the program, and the leaderboard speaks for itself.
Yeah, and I think two things to build on that. Different is not better. I think anytime we are stuck in something that requires a lot of hard work, the shiny object, the grass is greener. We say water your own instead of hopping over the fence. And then, if I was working, let's say I was remote coaching an athlete that was trying to win the 35 to 39 division, the way that you move in every single rep that you do within, whether it be a Metcon, skill work, lift, whatever, you've curtailed, you've dialed in your warm-ups for every single style of workout. You've manipulated different variables within your warm-up to understand this is what helps me within the workout. I tried this hurt. You have an intention for every single piece. You reflect on that intention and sort of get that data. You have cool down practices, post specific things that move the needle on, whether it's your subjective feeling or your Whoop score. So we make our way down this list. If every single one of those things is done with intention, and an athlete's like, I think I want a little bit more, and I got to pull a piece from MFT or Hatchet or wherever, that's fine. But we're talking about, again, this like 0.00001% where that would be the case. And the great thing is you're looking at second, third, fifth, sixth place finishes in the entire world on this stuff. And a lot of them, were not served up on a platter, these wheelhouse workouts. It was just that general fitness test like we thought it was going to be. And they really excelled within that space. If they're following that programming, I think it just speaks for itself.
I mean, that's the name of that's like the theme of like what Roy and I talked about going into the AGOQ and going, training moving forward towards semifinals in the games, is that if you don't have a good reason, don't do it. I do think that is still a trap. The buffet items there. It's like, I want to go back to the buffet over and over again. It's like, nah, you've got enough on your plate. Eat that plate first. Worry about that, digest that, and let's come back tomorrow, as opposed to just.
I don't know if you've ever been to the Wynn buffet in Vegas, but that would be very tough there. Sorry.
I don't know if I could. Anyways, no, that's all I was going to say, is that the theme for our season this year with Roy was, everything is on purpose. It kind of fits right in line with what we talk about with Misfit Athletics, but making sure that we don't just do things for the sake of doing things. Being a little bit older, not that Roy's super old, he's 35, but he basically says, I don't have the juice to do the things I did when I was, 10 years younger and I was doing 15 pieces a day. Now I only have time to really pour my effort into like 3 or 4 really good things. And that's going to be enough.
Yeah, head to YouTube and watch some Granite Games events from last year if you're wondering about how Roy responds to his volume, what he can get out of certain things. I don't know if Ted, do you still got a microphone close enough? I might have some questions, or you can relay via Sherb, or you can put them in the chat. I just want to make sure we're going to be talking about where we are traveling to and where the Misfit Athletes are going to be. And my mind
right now,
my mind has, sometimes it plays a little bit of ping pong. Sometimes it plays a little bit of, what's the game with the flippers? Pinball. That's what I was searching for. See, I can't even think of pinball. I got a lot going on. So week one, myself, Sherb, and Ted will be at the Lowlands Throwdown in Amsterdam, coaching Holly Holgerson and Luca Juice Kitchen.
Additionally, that weekend we've got Paige Semenza at Syndicate.
Yes.
And Justin Reidelbach, who's part of the SoGo Misfits, will be competing at Syndicate as well.
And Gabe will be there coaching Paige. So you can go introduce yourself to Gabe if you're going to be there. The following weekend, the following week, he's not going to be able to get those through TSA, is he?
Yeah, he is.
The following weekend, Hunter will be at the MAC with Kelly Clark. Anybody else, Ted?
Yeah.
Hannah Hardy competing with CrossFit West Chase, one of the West Chase teams. Shaylin Lure, who's part of the Storm Squadron, and Alexis Johnson, who is on one of the other programs.
All
teams.
at the MAC.
Yeah.
Yes, all at MAC.
Wow.
Have fun,
Hunter, you better paint Misfit on your chest. Just walk around that place. Just
Already got it. Already got it. It's a full back tattoo. Wraps around my nipples. The two eyes in Misfit are my nipples.
I like it.
Freaking me out.
Week
Got the
3,
eyes.
I believe, Ted, we have some Granite Games.
Marshall Creed will be competing at the Granite Games in week 3.
That's right. And week 4, Atlas Games. I think every person,
The house.
Canadian Invasion.
Yeah, we're all going. But I'm still upset about the last time I went up there. So I tried to rent a private jet, but it was 13 grand. So we're going to have to drive again.
Well, why didn't you then?
So we're taking a Tahoe.
Just find 13 people that will pay $1,000 to fly up there. I don't even know that the plane holds 13
seats?
people.
Yeah, is that many seats in the plane?
Exactly.
It's a two-seater.
Got
Need
Yeah,
13 people to fund me and the
I
pilot.
think we know a
flying
pilot
to
that can fly
Canada.
that too.
I'm starting to GoFundMe.
I think that's what they were
You
for.
get that?
I'm pretty sure that's what they were for.
Jesus Christ.
Yes. Austin, Caroline, Atlas Games.
Be there.
Anybody else, Ted?
That's it.
That is it. So we are obviously looking forward to semifinals. Looking forward to. I have never been on the large landmass portion of Europe. I've been to Iceland and UK, so I'm pretty excited to get over there and see that and have the opportunity to coach Luca in person for the first time. It was incredibly beneficial having him here in town and working with him. And that next step is getting him sort of through the Misfit style competition coaching, level of support from the community, all that good stuff, because that actually has been probably the greatest feedback that we've gotten over the course of the years with athletes is like I felt pretty good about my training in a lot of scenarios, and like it's, you know, the mindset work is really great, but the idea of feeling comfortable and calm and having these boxes checked off for what needs to take place at a competition is a really powerful thing, because as we say, it's pretty tragic when someone does put all that work in and gets themselves to that place and then just haven't figured out how to put it together in a competition. So we take that part very seriously and are excited to hit the road again and see everybody.
Yeah, we're gonna try to take 2 of those podium spots over there. So just put it on blast right now. 2 spots.
That's right. I would like to talk about warming up for the clean and jerk. Now, when I say the clean and jerk, I am referencing any sort of session where we scrape the area of 90% of your clean and jerk. Now, before you warm up, asking yourself, where am I at today? When is the last time I actually clean and jerked the weight that I have used for this old 90%? If it's something that you lifted 4 years ago and
Grandma's basement.
I would have locked it out if the rafters were higher.
Just that problem.
Yep. That is a prerequisite to this conversation. But I believe that the clean and jerk, especially when we start to flirt with those higher numbers, becomes the ultimate expression of when we tell an athlete, if you're trying to get better at strength and you're really good at conditioning, how could you possibly condense the amount of effort and focus and detail from a 20-minute long AMRAP with your transitions and your level of focus and your strategy and how hard you pushed, all of that? How can you condense that down into a session where you're just doing a handful of lifts? Because it is what is required to, again, if you are working on something like this and really trying to move the needle on a lift, it's the type of thing that requires that. And I think that goes into how you warm up. It goes into your mindset. It goes into like, again, concentration of effort, like stepping up to a barbell and knowing your enemy, knowing what it's going to feel like to drive through your legs and 2 inches off the floor, not having that feeling of like, holy shit, this thing is heavy. How am I supposed to get under it? How am I supposed to stand it up? How am I supposed to put this over my head? All of that. So it's just, when we are doing, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up, when we are doing this sort of peaking schedule and we can't go into guessing on the lift and following this perfect linear progression for every single lift, you got to be ready for these days where we have the waves. And I think, again, out of all of the movements, the most challenging session you're going to get is the clean and jerk.
I agree.
Yeah, I think like when we're thinking about warming up, I think a lot of times people overcomplicate it as far as like how much different it needs to be than a Metcon, for example. And I think there's the commonalities that I try to get with people is, one, it's kind of that sweat check mentality. It's, if it's a 20-minute AMRAP, you're using the sweat check to kind of elicit that, full body blood circulation, so you can actually deliver oxygen, to muscle tissues throughout the 20 minutes. For the clean and jerk specific, or really any lift, but the clean and jerk, where you're essentially using that as like a ramp up to wake up your central nervous system. So kind of the same, it's the same idea. We're still signaling to the body that it's time, that we're getting ready to go. The difference after that becomes how much sort of mobility and muscular activation that you might use to prime, kind of, again, additionally prime yourself to do those lifts. The way that I think about it is I read something that I liked. This is people who take exercise physiology classes probably might have heard this, but the ramp protocol is basically like, it's basically like blood flow, activation, mobility, and then you're kind of progressing into the specifics of the buildup. But it's probably just I think people might overcomplicate it as far as like, what order do I need to do things? What boxes need to be checked? But it's very similar to that of a Metcon. You're getting the blood flow, you're getting the mobility, you're getting the activation that you need for specific musculature, and then the specific warm up of just the movements. If it's pull ups, thrusters, and box jumps, there's a set of it's like, okay, I got to warm up my overhead position. It's no different than in a clean and jerk or a lifting session. And it just might be more like, hey, there's a little bit more emphasis on empty barbell work and the positional nature of those things that might be slightly more important than, the perfect thruster, for example.
Yeah, I said before on the podcast, go watch a hook grip video and watch how much time is spent by those athletes getting ready to do their main lifts. Obviously, they have a little bit of a less of a menu to choose from than maybe we do, but one of the common questions or common things I get when an athlete sends me a video of them doing their clean and jerk is, I want to see warm-up reps. I want to make sure that you are moving with purpose in every single warm-up rep that you do, and that you treat the 95-pound barbell ahead of your 295-pound clean and jerk the same way you would address the 295-pound bar. So it's really important that you approach these things with the intention of moving with speed to prime yourself to lift heavy. And if you aren't taking that level of care when you do these things, then you need to reevaluate whether or not it's a priority to you. Because again, that is what the best athletes are going to do. They're going to treat the empty bar all the way up to 90% with the same amount of focus and intensity and effort that they do. And that is why they're more successful at those lifts.
You're telling yourself a story as you're doing this, right? Because it has practical application, all of the things that you guys mentioned. But then there's the idea of, I did get good and greased up. I did do my activation. I did move with intention when it came to my warm up. And you're telling yourself a story about how important your session is, and your ability to follow through when you've really bought in that way is heightened at each level, where you're willing to, coach isn't here to say 3 minutes in this position. Coach isn't here to say, what the fuck is that lollipop split jerk, right? You practice how you play. Like if you are going to go through the motions on your warm up, how's your central nervous system supposed to know that it's time to, to get into it? And then I think the last piece is just knowing who that alter ego is again. Like my mind always goes to I don't know, like movie characters, are you Joe Pesci in Goodfellas? Are you John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever? You're walking through the gym and greasing up your eyebrows and pointing at people. Are you Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men? You're blowing the car up and walking into the pharmacy like nothing's happening. Like which other entity is, you got to find your style of how you get pumped up. We will never see Hunter running around the gym with pom-poms. We're never gonna Hunter's not gonna be like, watch this shit, bro. But if his version is the guy, the dude that uses the cattle prod thing or whatever it is in No Country for Old Men, if that is Hunter, if he's gonna blow up the car and
that thing is fucking terrifying. That fucking air gun. Come here, Sherb.
I'm good, bro.
Exactly. But if that is your version, you still got to go there. That one's much more internal, but you still do need to go there. And I watch a lot of athletes, let's say we got clean pulls. This is one that I thought was kind of funny. Think about the amount of effort if we're going over 100% of your snatch or your clean, and you are trying to move the needle on how you get through your first and second and into your third pull. And you just sort of go through the motions a little bit. You treat it like you would a deadlift, a slower strength movement. You treat it like a back squat. The bar, when you shrug, is, moves a millimeter and you're like, oh, that's heavy. That sucked. No, you're stomping your way into that movement or getting yourself into that mindset of that movement to then go and do that. So I know that in these comp blocks, when your linear progression is within a single session, you're climbing up those ladders and sometimes you're cleaning, sometimes you're clean and jerking. You need to take these sessions as seriously as you would given the opportunity to build through linear progression over the course of time. Your proof of concept is happening within that day and not over the course of 6-7 weeks, that sort of thing.
Two things I just want to add real quick is the one, we talk about it a lot with the volume back squat session. It's or the volume back squat work or the Texas method, the 5x5 squat sessions, those really rugged sessions that a lot of people know what they feel like. And it's yeah, my first 2 sets felt like garbage. My third set is when it started to feel good, that sort of thing. Same thing applies. If that's the case, I'm not saying, hey, add 2 more sets to the back end of your lifting session, but that should be a mental note. That's oh, okay, maybe I need to warm up a little bit more. If my positions aren't feeling dialed in with 135 pounds, go back to the floss band, work around whatever you need to do, and then go back. Still doesn't feel good, go back. It's a laziness thing ultimately, and I get it. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of shit you have to do, but that's the fucking sport. And then the other thing I would add is maybe a little bit less about the warm up. And once people get into sessions, lifting, and this applies to me because I don't get bored lifting, but I generally like Metcons better. But you do your lift and then you go and it's oh, I'm scrolling through Instagram. And there's a level of focus, and it's just that a 20-minute AMRAP, you're not stopping 6.5 minutes in to scroll through Instagram, right? You're in it for 20 minutes. With a lifting session, it's oh, that might take just as long, but I'm doing 7 reps, and the level of focus, needs to be the same. And it's obviously, if you're using your phone to film yourself, that's one thing. But if it's I do a lift, yeah, that rest period was 6 minutes because I was scrolling through Instagram. Then I went to the bathroom and then I rested 2 minutes between my other 2 sets to make up time. It's if you need the structure, start a clock, put yourself on an EMOM or something like that. But the kind of intent, the almost mid session self-reflection, or thinking about how that set went and what you're going to do in the next set, those things apply just as much as kind of your score in a Metcon. It's the lifting sessions can be more difficult just because of the kind of the ebb and flow nature of oh, this is hard, now I'm going to sit here for 4 minutes.
Agreed. Semifinals prep. Ted, those are called semifinals bound. Is that right? Did I make that up?
Yep.
So we've got some new episodes on YouTube of semifinals bound, and they sort of began with documenting Caroline's journey, and there's a sort of an evolution there with Paige and Luca being in town for sort of a training camp type weekend. And I want to expand on some of the stuff that are in those videos, especially based on how our athletes internally reacted to some stuff and some of the DMs that I've gotten based on it. And I think one really important thing, and some of you have probably already pulled this out of some of the stuff Paige said in that episode. If you haven't seen it, just head to YouTube and type in semifinals bound or go to our channel and check that out. But she was talking about seeing Hannah Hardy's machine scores and then being like, holy shit, okay. So that's where we're at now. And then trying to hold those paces specifically. And we've done episodes before. We've talked about when I'm talking to an athlete, I call it the power of possibility. We used to call it the 225 snatch phenomenon. It could be the whatever sub 3 Fran. It's essentially when an athlete is in their own little bubble, and maybe in their bubble they're better than they get better scores than everybody else, and don't really realize that there's another level on top of that, and then on top of that, and on top of that of where they could go. And you see that type of stuff in a place like the Discord where someone puts in their pacing instructions like that. It's excellent. It's a great way to grow. It's a great way to, I know Austin is like, I have my machine guy that I'm chasing. I have my lifting guy that I'm chasing. I have my Metcon guy that I'm chasing. So he has specific people that he wants to know their scores going into something. I love that. I love the sort of online training partner vibe. What does not work is the natural order of things does not change. The physics of it all, the iterative process of, so let's keep it super simple. You have a 7'10" 2K and someone that you think is in the same realm as you has a 6'40" 2K. Talking about rowing. Going and trying to hold that pace. Let's say you do. You're really just being, and I don't know how soft you're being in your training, but that is a very rare case. It does happen sometimes where you see an athlete like show up at a training camp or whatever, and they're like, holy shit, I'm better than I thought I was. That's an outlier scenario. Understanding that I want that to be my Metcon pace down the road is what's reasonable in terms of a jump. Like, is it 50 calories per hour? Is it 100 calories per hour? Is it 2 or 3 seconds? If I'm trying to make a 15-second gap or something, is it 1, 2, 3 seconds, and sort of iterating in that process? So I just want to make sure that people who are seeing other people's scores and sort of wondering why they can't go there and potentially making the mistake of going there for a short period of time instead of the whole session, let's just dial it back a little and look at it as that iterative process. Because again, super powerful to have those people, to be able to compare yourself to that, to set those goals, but still understand that it took them whatever. Most of our athletes are in that, decade range of how long it took them to get there. So just sort of understand that and be like, yeah, you know what? I can't ask myself to hold X pace, but it's going to be, again, 50 calories per hour at a time that you're going to be able to start to move the needle that way.
I had a similar story with Jenna, as opposed to the first day of competition for the AGOQ quarterfinals. And she's like, I think I have to redo the second event, the chipper with the muscle ups at the very end. She's like, I did terrible. I was 2 minutes behind Sophie. And I was like, all right, well, that's like fine. This is where we're at right now. I said, I don't think it's necessary to redo just based on the math of doing the workout out. Everything populates in the leaderboard. Sophie's first in the world. Jenna's ninth. Both very, very, very good scores. But if you had asked her, 2 hours before the deadline if that was good, she's like, no, my weekend's over. So again, I think you've said it before on the podcast, but comparison is a thief of joy. Making sure that you realize that you can get there, but you might not get there today is a super impactful thing. And I think it's one of your bullet points later on in this thing, so I won't jump ahead. But, understanding that,
jump around. That's fine.
I was just going to say, later on, that gap of where you are now to where you want to be it feels like it's a prison, but it's actually a gift. Like, that means you have the opportunity to grow and get better at something. And that distance between where you are and where you want to be should excite you to the fact you have something very specific to work on, as opposed to just like walking around aimlessly like the mall without a map to know where you're going. Like, you want to know what that, that enemy is and how to get there, and knowing right now where you are and where you want to go provides you a general roadmap of how to get there. And iterating slowly over time is how you stack that 1% after 1% after 1%. Before you know it becomes a lot.
I normally don't go into like ultra specifics with my athletes, especially close to competition. But I think this one's useful enough, and I think the community's tight enough that I don't think they'll mind. Austin and Caroline coming away from that weekend with Luca talking about how you have to know your footwork between the C2 bike and the rope climb. Sort of being like, is my athlete IQ what I thought it was? And it's like, okay, well, you were at the CrossFit Games last year. You were in the Last Chance Kitchen. My mind always goes there because of Top Chef. It is. So, like, if you have this thing where you're like, holy shit, like I could get this much better. Like, I could know this much more about myself. I could start to think about this thing within the workout. Like, that's why I wrote in the notes, the gap is the gift. That is the place where you get to go move the needle like insanely well. And then on Luca's side, at a certain point, he asked me, do I do any movements right? Like, is there anything that I do right? And he basically was like, the first split jerk that I did, I was like, oh, that's a split jerk. And that's how you split jerk. And he basically has taught himself everything that he's done. So coming from a soccer background, we joked around all weekend that he doesn't have heels. We're going to see if we can get him some heels so that he can actually, stay grounded in his movements. But it's like, okay, so if I'm already here, if I've already made it to this place and I have this far to improve, that's the type of person in both scenarios, all three of them specifically, that can move the needle to a place where they are making significant progress, which once you get to a really high level is hard to achieve. It's hard to measure. It's hard to feel like you're doing that. We've got athletes who are improving 200, 300% in their placings in comparable workouts from year to year in quarterfinals that don't think they're getting better, right? Because they're caught in the moment. They're caught in that day. They did this workout against this person. They guessed wrong. And, a couple of times Caroline has guessed, okay, this is my calories per hour. And then it turns out those were Luca's and Austin's. So just sort of extrapolate a little bit that maybe that, needs to be dialed back a little bit. So the gap is the gift. And I want you to be frustrated. I want you to be angry. I want you to give a fuck as an athlete. But I am here. Sherb is here. Hunter is here in those scenarios to tell the athlete, no. Like, that's not what this is. Where you're frustrated. That's good. That's fuel. But we're going to direct it at something and start to figure out either the intention or the way that you move or, whatever it could be. So, the gap is the gift is a really big one, and the type of thing that over the course of your career as an athlete, you want that maturity level to really start to add up to a point where you understand that. Another thing that popped up that was interesting, that was sort of, I don't know if it was, I'd have to ask Paige directly if it was the same for her, but they were surprised that they didn't get a final kick in their bitch work pieces. So you're going through and you're doing, what was the row that they were doing that day? How many calories was it? Was it 60?
Yes. Yeah.
It was the longer AMRAP. And they're like, okay, so we've all got our paces. We've all decided this is what I'm going to hold. And then all of them wanted to know, like, how hard can I go in the final one? Then we went to the track and they had their 800s, 600s, and 400s. And, there's a little bit of competitive nature there, but they're also like, okay, so this is the last one. Like, this is it. Okay, get 100 meters left and I'm just going to let it rip, right? The answer was no. And there's two reasons for that. One, this spectrum that we were laying out for you, Maffetone on one end, the send bike piece that you see them do in that first episode together, That is the spectrum, and there are a lot of stops in between. We want you at the math pace. We want you at that, like, okay, same time domain as math, but I'm actually going to see how many, meters I can get, what wattage I can truly hold. No constraints when it comes to that. We got those 60 calorie things. We've got 500 meter stuff. You know what I mean? So we are trying to spend dedicated time within all of these stops along the way from each end of the spectrum. And that is going to develop the type of engine and motor, that they write about. You get your own YouTube video, day in the life. They want to know what flavor Cheerios you eat because you have such a robust engine and it has taken you to a place within your career where, again, the people want to know silly facts about you. So also understanding the other side of this is we had a ton of shit left to do on those same days, right? What does that final kick do to a central nervous system, right? Like we end at 80 some percent in some wave. And the athlete says to me, well, it says 1. Can I do 13? No. What? Why would you do that? Why? Like that makes no sense. And then obviously within a Metcon itself, it's harder to do. Hunter's talked about the difference between, I never get this right, natural cadence versus personal. What do you call it?
I say natural versus individual cadence.
Yeah,
basically
so
like go ahead.
No, go ahead. Basically, it's just the idea that we're so good at this going remote.
Basically, like the natural cadence is like, hey, wall balls. Like no matter what, like I can't change how fast gravity's working. I do X number of wall balls a minute, no matter what. If I'm doing pull-ups, that's a little bit more individual. Depends on how long your arms are, how fast your kip is, like those sorts of things. So it's just the personalized how fast you do certain movements.
So when we're within a Metcon, you're going to have situations where you can't move faster because of things of that nature. And then if you're hopping on an assault bike at the end and you have the ability at the end of a 15-minute AMRAP to hit 1700 watts, you probably didn't pace the workout very well, right? So a lot of CrossFit stuff sort of takes care of itself. But I think it's really important to understand that we are, just trying to spend really dedicated time at all of these stops. And that's what allows us to adjust when we're actually within the sport going to attack things. We're going to be ready for every single scenario, whether it's legs and lungs are screwed up, or it's just a muscle burn, or like it's a sprint type of an event and you really got to, try to redline the whole time. Whatever it is, we are trying to prepare you for that. So really try, especially within bitch work intervals, to leave that competitive nature just completely outside of it. Unless you want to talk about like average pace over the course of the whole thing. That would be a more accurate way to do that. And then, you're going to have to be paying attention to that the entire time to know whether you're keeping up with somebody or not.
You want to be in tune with how you're feeling during those things, because that's what we're effectively doing, is working through. And again, it depends on whose definition and who's talking about the energy system, but how many different gears that you have is a great way to think of this. Like what you just described, Drew, or I don't know, 3 really quickly, but there's probably somewhere around, I don't know, 15 or 1,000, depending on who you ask, between the Sen bike piece and your math bike piece. And this is actually a great segue into something I was going to talk about with yesterday's class at the affiliate for Team Misfit, which was 15 minutes in teams of 5, push a sled 100 meters empty as fast as you can. And at the end, some of our gym members over in Wyndham, we'd only have 2 sleds. So there were bigger teams and people were like, oh, I got robbed. I didn't get to do 4 or 5. How are we scoring this? And I'm like, the only thing I'm going to score you on is like your effort, because that's what you're trying to get out of this piece, is what you can pour in for effort multiple times in this like Sen sled piece. That is what you want to be in tune with when you're doing these things, is knowing, all right, if, like you said a second ago, Drew, if I can hold a 1700 on the last assault bike interval, I probably should have been at 600 for the rounds before that instead of 400 for the first 5 and then 17 in the last one. Like, learn how these things make you feel. And that way, when you go to do a workout, you kind of fully wrap your head around the idea that like a stimulus is just a stimulus and they're creating adaptation in your body, but you're trying to figure out how these things play off one another, because that'll and then inform you later on down the road when you go somewhere with very similar movements or the exact same movements, how you can approach and attack it, as opposed to be like, I've never done this thing before. No, you might not have done this exact same thing, but you've done things very, very similar that feel very, very similar. And that's going to allow you to think about how you should approach it when it, actually matters.
Yeah, and that's the perfect segue to the heads-up display concept. As funny anecdote, I tried to bring this up, and Luca hadn't seen Iron Man, so it didn't really work all that well. But just the idea of the hidden data that you have when you are, okay, so we're doing those same rowing intervals and you have that information right in front of you. I'm rowing at this calories per hour. Here are my strokes per minute. Here's my average, potentially even if you had connected your heart rate monitor, here's my heart rate here. The hidden data is in the feeling there. The most important information that you can get about yourself as an athlete is understanding what is happening within your physiology and your biology in those moments. Because when you go to do actual CrossFit and you're in the moment, you're not going to have your splits. You're not going to have some sort of, magical rating that Iron Man would have in his corner. I'm at, my body is at 1,500 calories per hour, whatever it is. So those feelings that you're getting on the rower, on the bike, anywhere, maybe you're out for a run and you're really paying close attention to your watch or your phone, those need to translate into what we would call the heads-up display as an athlete in a Metcon, in a competition. This is how I feel. This is the time domain. My strategy needs to be updated in real time because this is how I feel. I went a little bit too hard here, whatever it is. So we're not always going to have that information right in front of us. But if we can connect our feeling within our body and our minds to the monitors, we can then take that information and know, like, it can even be used as mental toughness. That's why a lot of people don't agree that mental toughness is a thing. If I can translate, like, in a Metcon, I don't like this feeling very much. I don't think I can hold this pace, but you have felt exactly the same and held your pace on a rower, you can then go back into the Metcon and say, I know this feeling. I can stay here for a while. I've been here for a while before. It wasn't all that fun, but I can go there. I can really be in this place. So the idea of the heads-up display is the best version of yourself as a CrossFitter. There's a lot of data sort of floating around in your brain that can be used within the moment to really narrow down on what's actually happening versus your perception within that moment. The last thing that I want to touch on here is just the idea of camaraderie versus comparison when it comes to training partners. We had two pieces over the course of the whole weekend where I said, let her rip. Like, your goal is to be standing there asking what your time is before the other person, and that's it. I want to see what happens when you're in a competitive environment. And again, we only did that twice, and that is a skill, and that is something that you should call out and know, and your competitor should agree to it. That should be part of it. It's just a sort of a willing, two-way street, right?
Sign a waiver.
Right, exactly. It's like a sucker punch, but metaphorically,
we'll punch
basically.
each other real quick. 3, 2, 1.
But there's something really powerful about they all sat on those rowers together. They had different focuses within that. There was a piece where you'll see in the video where Paige is focusing on unbroken toes to bar, like sacrificing potentially pace in another movement, when Luca was fast, unbroken, don't set the dumbbells down in your lunges, and then what happens outside of that happens, right? Keep the transitions good, but if your row pace has to go down, you have to break the toes to bar. It is what it is. So you can still lean into the power of camaraderie, the idea that you're in an affiliate class, the idea that you do have training partners. We train with Caroline all the time when she's getting ready for stuff, and we don't have any business training with Caroline in a competitive environment, but it is powerful to sit next to someone and sort of have just that tiny little bit of a boost, whether it is physical, whether it is mental, and just know when it's appropriate to call on either of those things. Obviously they can be done together. Competing is also camaraderie and fun, but definitely not vice versa. So know what you're trying to accomplish. We're trying to move the needle for you specifically in almost every piece. So it's going to be hard. Sherp's twitching over there. It's going to be challenging not to want to compete in every single piece, but it's more challenging to not like your results after a 6-month, 9-month, 12-month period. So.
Yeah,
it's pretty hard too.
Go ahead, Hunter. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that's a hard thing to do, and I catch myself as somebody. maybe the least competitive person here. Of CrossFit. Well, no.
No, I am. Fuck you.
Did you sign a waiver?
But I can't help but still look at the affiliate leaderboard every once in a while, and if I'm just like that irritated me. Like it irritates you. You're not where you thought you wanted to be, or you're just like, no, I expect to be in this tier of the leaderboard, and it's like, wow, it turns out I got some work to do or something like that, or I thought I was going fast, but I wasn't. I think there's the element of, you're not next to somebody racing them, but there's also the kind of the Paige and Hannah sort of thing where it's just like, again, maybe because you weren't right next to that person when you were, competing against them, or you were, and you just severely underestimated what you thought you could do or what that other person might do. And it's like, what Paige said, it's like, oh, okay, I guess, that's how this is going to go. Like, watch this sort of thing. And there's like, that's like that, hopefully that positive competitive atmosphere, as opposed to just kind of pouting, if you're not, again, it would be easy for me to be like, fuck, that's like, why was I not at that spot on the leaderboard? But it's like, okay, it was Tuesday, and like, I don't have an excuse, or I do have a whole bunch of excuses, but it doesn't matter because I'm kind of after that long-term, that long-term progress. And, in the example with Paige and Hannah, it's like those two are, highly competitive and very seasoned, intelligent competitors, where that sort of thing is more, to me, it's like that's great because maybe Paige isn't training with somebody you need that occasional checkpoint to be like, okay, I am on pace with my competitors, or like, oh, holy fuck, like maybe I've got some work to do. And that, going back to that, the kind of the gap is the gift sort of thing. That's either like, wow, I've got some room to improve, or turns out I held her paces, which was faster than I thought I was going to. And now I have to update my, kind of my data as far as what I might be able to do in a similar instance later on down the road.
It's just a double-edged sword because you can easily get talked out of doing your own strategy, which is best for you to grow the direction you need to go. So, in your example, I think it's very valuable for Paige to look at Hannah's machine scores and go, all right, like I'm not quite at that level, cals per hour or split, but how do I narrow the gap between where I am and where I want to be? And that just means going back to the drawing board and kind of getting yourself into the things that are going to allow you to move the needle, as opposed to then going and compete, because this is, again, a really easy trap to fall in. And before you know it, you're being more obsessed with the end product than how you grew from, said training piece.
Yeah. It's about what you do with the information, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Sure.
I mean, come on. Like, we want that. We want the little crazy. We want the itch. We like to see that, we want it directed in the right way. But when an athlete gets frustrated, if it's in person, I'm going to smirk in my brain. And if it's not in person, I'm going to smirk in real life and then try to channel that energy. Right. Like one of the recommended the Relentless book, and he talks about finding those buttons within athletes. And, I'm going to annoy them basically in 10 different ways, and whichever one elicits that response that pushes them to a new place is the one, it's sort of locked in. That's how I'm going to accomplish that. So when you get that information as an athlete, I think a lot of people go in two places. One is, I suck. Why can't I do that? Or I can do that when they can. And, we need to make it from where you are to where you're going in an intelligent way. And, a lot of that is our job, but a lot of that's also you as an athlete understanding what it takes to get from point A to point B. I think we're closing in on longer than usual podcast episode. I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts to sort of wrap this up. I know it's hard to have final thoughts on a meandering journey.
Honestly, the thing I'd like to wrap up with is just the Discord, going back to that one more time. One of the things I thought was really cool in the last couple of days here were athletes talking about either going through a period of difficulty because the training volume is really high and they're feeling really beat up and slow and kind of behind their normal paces, or they just got sick with, this, that, or the other, and they're discouraged about like how they're falling behind, the community by not being able to do a few things here. And I thought really impactful to go out and put yourself out there and be like, hey, I'm struggling with these things, because oftentimes you think that you're the only one struggling with these things, and this community is what can help propel you or knock you back into being motivating, not being discouraged. And you should really lean into that community, because that is how we're all going to get better together, and using that as a resource is super impactful. So if you're not on Discord, or if you're a little bit shy up there and all you throw up there is I got this many reps of the power cleans, like use it for a little bit more than that, because there's a lot of value in that channel.
I think the only thing I'll add too is it was a bullet point that we didn't. It looked like you added. Sure, we didn't quite. We hit on effectively, but is the kind of the personalization aspect of all the training related stuff that we're talking about. Again, requires like a level of self-reflection on the athlete's part, and then implementation. Like the self-reflection is great, and I think that's something that maybe more in like recent years has become somewhat cliche, and just like oh, have like internal retrospect. It's like that's great, but if it's like if it's
there
just
he is. Post vacation Hunter is being way too nice and polite to us.
If the level of your understanding of that is basically a tweet, you're missing the point. It's I guess what I mean is like if you're just hearing like, oh yeah, I reflected, it's like reflect and then apply that stuff to your training. Apply the, if the Maffetone stuff, if you're like me biking at 170,000 RPMs, like, adjust a little bit, and, try the linear progression that we were talking about. If you start to feel good 3/4 of the way through your heavy clean and jerk session, what does that say about the warm up that you did beforehand? And then like when we're talking comparison between you and other athletes, there's a time and a place for that, because you want to make sure that, you're not falling behind, but at the same time, understand that you are on your own very specific journey. And if you're comparing yourself to other people constantly, like the literal only variable you have when you're comparing to somebody else is whatever they typed into the screen onto Discord or onto the website or told you. You have absolutely no other context for literally anything about that person and their day, how their life is going for that past week or anything like that. It's comparing yourself to other folks is great for kind of finding that gap so that you can close it and make yourself better. But using it as like kind of that negative, like, oh, I can't believe I lost to so-and-so, I'm going to smash my head into the ground for the next week, is the kind of opposite of what you should be thinking. So the long-winded point is that you should have, be thinking about all this. Yeah, piss off, Siri. Is it just taking this stuff and, applying it where necessary to your personal game?
The artist formerly known as Mos Def would say, "Don't talk about it, be about it." Now known as Yassine Bey, right, Sherp?
I think. I don't know if he went back to Mos Def.
We're not really sure.
He was part of that Chappelle stage thing, by the way. I don't know if you saw that, Drew. Did you see that Chappelle got rushed at the end of it? Everyone one of his shows. And then like Chris Rock and like a bunch of Busta Rhymes, other people came on stage.
Yeah. We'll leave that topic.
All right. Leave it alone.
Where it belongs. The conversation once Ted stops record. Yeah, I think this episode I'll end with is a result of I take keeping my ear to the ground of the Misfit community very seriously. Every single bullet point that's in here is from someone else within the community, whether it be another athlete, another coach, someone in Discord. And typically what that means for me is that's where we're going to direct a lot of our content, whether that's an article, a more targeted podcast type episode, video, whatever it is. If this type of sort of freestyle checking in on these things is the type of content that you guys want to see, if you want to see more episodes like this, it's very easy for me to hop into a note and sort of type these things out. So I've joked before, half jokingly, that, Ted's the executive producer, and then the Misfits in the community are the people below that, sort of steering the content. So if this is something that you guys like, feel free to let us know in the Discord. Can we do it?
We did
So.
it.
All right, ladies and gents, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Misfit Podcast, and thank you to our show sponsors. You can head to properfuel.co, use the code word Misfit to save 10% on any and all orders. Sharpentheaxeco.com, use the code word Keala, Keala. You save 10%. We donate 10% to the Keala Foundation. Last but not least, MisfitAthletics.com for your individual programming needs, TeamMisfit.com for your affiliate programming needs, and the SugarWOD Marketplace. We'll see you next week.